And I have a camera in one hand. I'm taping Tom Ernst. This is going to be on his blog later on, so you'll be able to see Tom, but not me, because I'm not wearing makeup, as I've explained to the camera. Last summer, our film guide Tom Ernst brought us a segment called Blocked by Blockbusters. It's centered on films that were largely overlooked when they came out because they were overshadowed by runaway summer hits or blockbusters. Well, Tom has been busy researching more movies that deserved a bigger audience then and still deserve an audience now. We're calling his sequel.
Isn't that kind of fun?
It is kind of fun. And it's ironic, too, because, blockbusters come in sequels. Generally, smaller movies don't. So there is irony in this presentation. Let's get right to the films you've chosen. And you've done it kind of in year by year, right?
Well, I hope so. I think I actually jump all over the place because I get excited about... I start in early and then I later on discover something that I forgot and go back. So I will give you the years, but they aren't going to be necessarily chronological. Okay. So back in 1975 when the Blockbusters started, which seems a great place to start this, two little movies, Love and Death by Woody Allen and Robert Altman's Nashville were sort of buried beneath the huge movie, which was Jaws at that time. And you might think, Woody Allen, Robert Altman, really? Those guys are big names. But they never were. Their films were always sort of under the radar. And particularly this great film by Allen called Love and Death, which is a spoof, of course, of the Russian, big sprawling Russian novel War and Peace. I think a very funny spoof at that. And Nashville, which ranks as one of my all-time favorite movies, this mosaic of politics and art and the entertainment industry. And I just saw it, I presented it to a group of people not long ago, and I still think it stands up today. So from 1975, I go with Love and Death in Nashville. And then I moved to Darkman. Do you remember Darkman?
I remember. It's a movie I've never seen, but I remember when it came out because they were trying to get people to go see it.
Oh my gosh, it stars Liam Neeson, who is this scientist, and he does this experiment, and he becomes this creature, this dark man, and he's in love with Frances McDormand. Now, these are two leads who aren't particularly, you put them in romantic lead roles, and he becomes this sort of night creature that protects Frances McDormand and other people. And it's done by Sam Raimi long before Spider-Man and everything else came along. It is a wonderful superhero kind of horror love story. And that came out in August of 1990. And as you say, people have heard of it, some people, and have missed it. I think this has everything. It's a little bit scary. It's certainly a superhero movie. It's dark, and it's got romance in it, too, that is quite spectacular. One of the finer films that sort of gets buried when you talk about these kind of things. And then I'm going to move way, way, way up ahead and go to Moonrise Kingdom by Wes Anderson, which is only 2012. I think a successful movie, but certainly only among the art crowd. And I really encourage anybody who missed that last summer or 2 summers ago to go out and see Moonrise Kingdom. Absolutely touching film about the innocence of love, and I'm saying real innocence. This is right from the start, where romance just first enters our heart and soul and minds. 2 young people who decide that they are in love against all odds. And this movie has Bill Murray and Bob Balaban, and it's just Wes Anderson.
Tilda Swinton. Bruce, I forgot his last name, huh?
So do I. Now, that's funny that we both forgot.
Okay, and I'm going to look it up on the internet while we're talking.
Okay, well, I will linger on with this until you find out his last name. And everybody at home is going, don't you know it's Bruce
Willis.
Okay.
I didn't even have to get that far. Thanks, yeah.
Okay, and I think this is just a remarkable, great summer movie. And it takes place in the summer. So I think it's...
And it has all of that Wes Anderson, that odd, the beautiful shots. Everything looks kind of like a picture, a beautifully composed picture, but the characters are all a little exaggerated and oddball.
Exactly, but you know what? This is probably one of his most accessible films at the same time. And I think it's something you can actually watch with your 12-year-old and up, I think.
I think that now this isn't a movie. This is not one of my favorite Wes Anderson movies for various reasons, but all the things you say are true. But I think one of the interesting things about it is that the adults all seem odd because it's like he's presenting them the way an unusual child would see them.
Brilliant. I think that's absolutely right and a perfect assessment of that film. Now here's one. I'm wondering if you're going to agree with me on this. I got such a charge out of this movie in 2012. This David against Goliath thriller, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and David Cope's Premium Rush. Now this is a movie. This is basically Speed on a bicycle. He is a bike courier who's being chased by bad guys, and through I think it's New York City, or is it I believe it's New York City. Anyway, it's just such a great little thriller. There's no bells and whistles to this. There's nothing particularly big. Nothing explodes as far as I remember, and it's even a little bit silly in what happens and how everything unfolds. But it was such a genuine kind of 1970s thriller. And it all takes place with this guy on a bicycle, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I think he does a great job. The film's called Premium Rush. And I think that describes how I felt while watching this film.
When you say it's a premium, sorry, I interrupted you, but when you say it's a 70s, you mean 70s style because it's from 2012. I just want to remind
clarify
audience,
that absolutely. But it struck me as kind of a 70s style of movies, the kind of thing
which is great.
When I went to see movies as a kid, this is the kind of thing that really would just exhilarate me, and it still does exhilarate me. I think Premium Rush is one of the great underlooked thriller movies and underlooked movies that is out there, and not too far in the distant past. 2012. James Wan. Okay, I'm going to throw in a horror movie. James Wan, of course, he is the guy who brings us a lot of sort of very, excessive violent movies in his horror films. Really kind of lightens things up and brings this really accessible, spooky movie, The Conjuring. This came out in 2013. The Conjuring is if you want to go up to the cabin and rent a film at the cottage, it's just like a little scary night. Instead of telling a ghost story by the campfire, try watching this movie. Although you're going to say the ghost story by the campfire is far superior. Yes, I understand the benefits of that. But if you don't want, if you just want to sit down, plop in a movie, The Conjuring is one of the most accessible horror films out there because it's just a scary ghost story. And I just really think that James Wan does it well in this. He really sort of gets the feeling of being scared without being without going into that area of violence and things that might offend people. It's just a good, scary ghost story. Did you have a chance to see it?
I did see this movie, yeah, and it's got a great cast. Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, Lily Taylor, Ron Livingston. It has a really good, and if I remember correctly, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson play an actual paranormal couple.
Yes.
And they're the couple that were involved in the case that also became the listen to the two of us this morning. I keep forgetting it. The haunting of that house. I'll look it up again.
Oh, right. You mean Amityville?
Amityville Horror.
Yes.
They play the psychic couple, and in fact, I think this might be the real story of the. No, this is set somewhere else, but I think it's the same couple. And it is really good. It's quite solid and it's interesting, and I like scary movies, so I liked this.
Yeah, I think this was great. It's a scary movie that the family can get scared together.
Yeah, I think because they work on the drama as well and the acting as well as the actual. There's a good story there, so
right.
The whole thing is complete. It's not just from scare to scare to scare. It's not the typical roller coaster.
Bingo, and it's just a really what builds up nicely. I really think the Innkeepers also fall into that, but it's not a summer movie, so we can't mention it. So
somehow or other we just did.
We just did.
Okay,
I'm going to go back in time again. I'm going to go back to Woody Allen, 1969, Take the Money and Run. A little summer movie and at this time Woody Allen was really just sort of getting on the screen as being somebody worth watching. Take the Money, Run is a kind of a documentary form comedy, so it was bizarre for people to see this film, and it only became the B picture at drive-ins. And it is about Woody Allen as a convict, and of course he's quite inept. I probably didn't need to say that. You probably assumed he is inept in whatever he does. But this is a delightful documentary-style comedy that Woody Allen did in 1969. If you haven't seen it in a while or never seen it, I recommend this one. Moving back to way up to 2001, this gentleman has a movie out right now called They Came Together. David Wayne, Wet Hot American Summer, not for the whole family. I'll preference that. This is a movie very much for adults. It's an outrageous spoof of summer camp movies, but it does feature very early performances from David Hyde Pierce, Paul Rudd, and how do you pronounce your name?
Janine Garofalo.
Garofalo.
Yeah, Garofalo.
It sounds like a storybook that my daughter has about this animal that nobody else sees. But anyway, it is witty, it is funny, it is over the top. It is David Wayne at, I think, one of his best, although I do think they came together really sort of makes him solid.
And it's an interesting choice because they came together, just came out in the last couple of weeks, and it's yet another movie. It's a small romantic comedy movie, very funny, that very kind of not nudge, nudge, wink, wink movie because they tell you what's happening and then they do it. They sort of deconstruct the modern romantic rom-com movie.
Yeah, rom-com.
And it's another movie that could get overshadowed this year, so it's kind of a twofer with this guy.
Twofer with David Wayne, absolutely.
Check him out.
And I also like to say that this guy has a way of spoofing without ridiculing.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets it right, and that's what makes his movies very funny.
So we're all in on the joke. It's not nasty.
It's
nice.
not nasty.
Yeah.
I think you're going to agree with me on this one. 2002, Michael Winterbottom looked at the Manchester music scene from 1976 called 24-Hour Party People. A great picture. It really is about Tony Wilson, who is a promoter and presenter of the time. Hilarious.
The late Tony Wilson, I should say, who was, having worked in the music industry at that time, and I think Steve Coogan plays him.
Yes, he does.
Wilson was I had the pleasure of having dinner with him once, and he was a remarkable man. Yeah, died very young, I think of liver disease or some kind of cancer. Way too young. It came out on him really suddenly. But the Manchester scene was very influential in the 80s, and it was a conglomerate of people who got together and tried a new way of having a record company. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Of course, this is when the Sex Pistols rose up and all these groups that came up through this. And it's a to the camera. Wilson or Coogan as Wilson speaks to the camera quite often. He breaks the fourth wall. Or is that the third wall?
That's
the fourth wall, right. And he breaks it all the time, and it works quite often. This doesn't work. It absolutely works in this movie. Now, Moon, 2009. Nobody, there's always these great big science fiction movies that come out this summer. Moon is a very quiet, very subtle science fiction. It takes place on the moon. Sam Rockwell gives this great one-man performance.
That's two characters, though.
Two characters, yes. And he plays two characters. And he's a lone astronaut manning a space station, but there is somebody else there. I'm tempted to tell you who else is there, but I think I'll keep that as a secret.
Okay.
And but let's just say it's directed by Duncan Jones, who does not want anybody to know that he is David Bowie's son.
I can imagine why. Has Duncan Jones made any other movies, do you know? Or is this his only one so far?
Yes, he did. He made a wonderful film with Jake Gyllenhaal. And oh my goodness, if I could only remember the name of
I'll look it up. We are running out of time, so you got one more movie to talk about, and then we got to hit the
Oh my gosh,
road.
and it's the movie that needs the most discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
Bamboozled by Spike Lee.
A movie I loathe. So you're going to have to tell to people why they should see it.
Okay, it's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely underrated. This is about a black group of actors who come up with an Amos and Andy type of television show that's a huge hit, and of course it destroys them because they're taking a huge step back in time. It's a wonderful look away how television and media and everything sort of corrupts the idea of what we can find funny and what we do think is funny and what is politically correct. I think there's an unfortunate last 20 minutes of the film where Spike Lee throws in a romantic thing involving himself and somebody else that loses the movie entirely. Karen, take another look at this movie. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Tom Ernst, as always, an interesting, challenging, and funny trip through moviedom. Tom Ernst, of course, says thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Tom Ernst is a Toronto-based film critic. We've linked to Tom's Real Tom Ernst website, and you'll find that link at cbc.ca/fresh air. Hopefully you'll see the video of this, which I've been shooting while we're talking. It's in the Facebook section. You may have to scroll down in the postings to find the link. We've also posted Tom's Blocked by Blockbuster 2, the sequel, there as well. Once again, cbc.ca/fresh air.